Members and officers to this meeting of the Council, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, this meeting will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode and dogs and cats are put out. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as Mayor, at all other times, you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimize any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should use the instant messaging IM icon in the bottom left of the Skype window and simply type "speak." I will come to you in the order I receive the requests. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. In the event that the Council requires to vote on any item of business before it at the meeting, I will announce that members of the Council have 20 seconds to vote by typing "for," "against," or "abstain" in the instant messaging icon. I will then ask Democratic Services to announce the decision made by the committee. In the event that a recorded vote is requested at Council, I will ask the members to switch on their microphones, and the Democratic Services officer will conduct a roll call of each member, asking whether they are for, against, or abstain from the recommendation in a report before announcing the outcome of the decision. Officers from Democratic Services and ICT will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. Right, Andrew, would you like to go through who is now in attendance, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager, and perhaps, Mr. Mayor, in order to save time, I can announce the members who are not in attendance at the meeting as yet. They are Councillor Aniel Pachella, Councillor Brian Jones, Councillor Tom Beadle, and that's it. I do have apologies, but we can get to that at the appropriate point of the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, okay, thank you, Andrew. Well, we're at the appropriate point in the meeting with item number 1, apologies for absence. And
Mr. Mayor, if
yes.
I could, it's Councillor Tom Beadle. I am here, and Anya Pachel and Pam Davis are on the other link that was used this morning. I've had to reboot my system in order to come back on this link, so there's a difficulty signing on to this one.
Okay, Councillor.
I'm here now, Tom. Thank you.
Right, looks like we're being joined one by one. So, okay, so we've got now Councillor Beadle and Councillor Pucella have joined the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay, the apologies I've received so far are from Councillor Steve Smith and from Councillor Richard Collins. I did receive one from Councillor John McCarthy, but we now know that he is here at the meeting. Okay.
Yes, I also have apologies from Councillor Tilsley now, and yeah, you've just mentioned, and Councillor Radcliffe as well.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, declarations of interest, please. Does any member have a declaration to make? I'll take silence as nobody has anything to declare then. Thank you very much. I'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of the minutes. And no doubt you will have seen that there are 2 sets of minutes, one for council held on the 30th of September 2020 and one held on the 21st of October 2020. I'll deal with the 30th of September first. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Move. Second.
Happy to second.
Okay, and then can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes for the 21st of October, please?
Move. Second.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Rod Shaw wishing to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I noticed that Councillor Williams had asked to speak, but she's put it in the text box,
Yep.
so I'll carry on if I may. I did notice a small error on page 5, where the announcements were done for Youth Mayor and Deputy Youth Mayor. Item 446 states that second line, announced be as a Youth Mayor, where it should be Youth Deputy Mayor, so that needs correcting.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Shaw. Andrew, did you get that? Andrew?
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please. Amanda Williams.
I was just asking to speak at the apologies. I've got another meeting at 5:15, so if this is ongoing, I will need to leave then for that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mike Clark, you have given apologies for Brian Jones, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've had item 3 now, and that's been moved and seconded for both sets of minutes. Thank you very much. Now, item number 4 is announcements from me, the Mayor. Good afternoon, and I hope that everybody is keeping safe and well. On behalf of BCBC and its residents, I had the honour of representing the authority by laying a wreath at the War Memorial in Bridgend Town on Remembrance Sunday. This important annual commemoration is when we as a nation remember and honour those who have sacrificed themselves in order to secure and protect our freedom. This seems particularly relevant this year as we are being asked to make small sacrifices for the good of everyone. I was also pleased to participate in a national poppy train, the initiative organised by Great Western Railways. Wreaths from around the country were collected on Armistice Day by a special train and taken to Paddington in London to be presented as part of a memorial. It was important that in some way Bridgend could take part in a national act of remembrance. This was later shown on BBC Wales News. On a very positive note, I would like to take this opportunity to send our congratulations to one of our residents, Barbara McGregor. Barbara from Kenfig Hill has just retired after serving nearly 44 years in the Royal Women's Navy. Having seen a list of Barbara's numerous and impressive achievements, she should rightly be proud of the many years of dedicated service that she has given to her country, culminating in her position as the most senior warrant officer of the Royal Naval Careers Service. As a token of our appreciation, Barbara has been presented with the armorial bearings of the county borough. I have since received a letter of thanks from Barbara, and I look forward to meeting her in the civic offices at some future date. I'm sure you will all join me in wishing Barbara a long and happy retirement. I now have some important meetings information for you to note, so please bear with me, and it might be useful if you have a pen and paper just to jot down. Due to the revised timing of the local government financial settlement from the Welsh Government, scrutiny of the medium-term financial strategy will need to be considered by scrutiny committees after Cabinet considers draft MTFS proposals on the 19th of January and before reporting to Cabinet on the 9th of February. So scrutiny committee dates need to be rearranged to be held within this period. Following consultation with the scrutiny committee chairs and the Section 151 officer, Council is requested to approve the following. The meetings of SOSC 1 on the 18th of January and SOSC 2 on the 3rd of February and SOSC 3 on the 11th of February to be replaced by meetings of all scrutiny committee members on the following two dates. Wednesday, the 20th of January at 10 a.m. and this is for Education and Family Support and Communities MTFS proposals. And Thursday, the 21st of January, also at 10 a.m. for Social Services and Wellbeing and Chief Executives MTFS proposals. A meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be held on Monday, the 1st of February at 10 a.m. to receive the recommendations of the scrutiny committees and BREP before reporting to Cabinet on the 9th of February. Thank you. Now moving on to item 5 to receive the report of the leader, Councillor Hugh David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Due to the pandemic, and as the Mayor reported, the recent remembrance events had to be marked in a very different way this year. Together with our Mayor and our Armed Forces champion, Councillor Young, also attended Bridgend Railway Station early on the morning of Armistice Day to meet the Poppies to Paddington train. This was a special service organised by Great Western Railway. It called at stations throughout South Wales and the west of England to collect commemorative poppy wreaths, which were then transported to London, where they formed part of a large public display. With many of the traditional local events organised by town and community councils either not taking place or being invite only, residents were encouraged instead to pay their respects by standing upon their doorsteps at 11 a.m. on Sunday the 8th of November to mark the 2-minute silence from home. Despite the disruption caused by the pandemic, we remain indebted to all those who volunteered, served, fought, and made the ultimate sacrifice for us. As these alternative arrangements, which were made in difficult circumstances, have demonstrated, we will continue to respect, honour, and remember them. Members will have noted recent media coverage of the development of a coronavirus vaccine. And this is, of course, essential as part of the long-term response to the pandemic. The UK Government COVID Vaccine Task Force has been leading work on funding and procuring vaccines for the United Kingdom, and the Wales COVID-19 Vaccine Delivery Programme Board is undertaking comprehensive preparatory work to ensure that we have suitable deployment arrangements in place ready for this eventuality. Medical Officer for Wales has written to all health boards and trusts to ask them to work with key partners in support of local delivery plans And the Council is, of course, supporting these efforts and working very closely with Cwm Taf Morgannwg University Health Board. We are currently awaiting further national direction on how the vaccine programme will be carried out, and I will keep members informed of latest developments of this vital work. In the meantime, we are asking residents not to let their guard down and to think twice about whether their actions could be putting them or other people at risk. Whether it is how you drop your children off at school, who you are coming into contact with, or how you behave when visiting a shop or a pub, small decisions could have a profound impact on other people. In the weeks and months to come, Welsh Government will be driving forward a new programme of public health messages to encourage people to change their long-term attitudes towards the coronavirus and how it spreads. Council will be supporting this, and I'm sure members will play their part in encouraging constituents to do likewise. We currently have a drive-through mobile testing facility located in the Bowles Hall car park of Bridgend Life Centre, and we're working with our Health Board and Public Health Wales colleagues on establishing a longer-term testing site for the county borough as quickly as possible. I hope to bring you more details on that very soon, but in the meantime, our council website continues to offer a one-stop shop of resources and updates, and officers can advise you on any further questions you may have. Finally, members may have seen the recent announcement from Welsh Government on its new framework for regional investment in Wales. Produced in partnership with local authorities, the private and third sectors, and research and academia bodies, the new framework has the backing of the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, a body of international repute. Under the banner of Made in Wales, it focuses on 4 broad investment priorities. These are to provide more productive and competitive businesses, to reduce factors which lead to economic inequality, support the transition to a zero carbon economy, and to support the development of healthier, fairer, more sustainable communities. This new programme of regional investment is expected to start early next year, and we will of course bring you further details when they become available. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Now moving on to item 6, the report of the Chief Executive. Mark, are you there?
I am, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm literally just going to say a few words of introduction and then bring in colleagues from the police. This, Mr. Mayor, is the latest in a series of presentations where we've invited key partners to present to full council. I suppose that's a recognition of how important it is now for so much of our work that it's delivered in partnership and it is more effective doing so. And we feel we have a particularly strong relationship actually with South Wales Police, particularly with today's invites, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Alan Michael, the newly appointed Chief Constable of South Wales Police, Jeremy Vaughan, so congratulations Jeremy on that well-deserved appointment, and also Dorian Lloyd, the Chief Superintendent. I'm hoping, Mr. Mayor, that this will follow the usual pattern where the police will give us a short presentation, in particular perhaps outlining some of their plans, some of their priorities and some of their work with the council and how we best work in partnership, and then hopefully at the end there'll be time for questions from members as well, which we will endeavour to answer in full. So no further ado, Mr. Mayor, perhaps if I welcome Alan Michael, the Police and Crime Commissioner, to take his presentation.
Yes, so thank you, Mark. Can I now then formally invite the Police and Crime Commissioner, Alan Michael, to give his presentation. And I think if I can say at this point, you're most welcome, and the new Chief Constable and Chief Superintendent. I understand, Mr. Michael, your preference is to have all the questions at the end in one go, shall we say, and then you will answer them all, rather than one question followed by an answer, then another question followed by an answer. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the welcome. We found that format works well in the virtual setting in particular. Otherwise, those who come last in the questioning list tend to get squeezed, whereas we'll try and be fair in responding to everybody, and obviously it helps in terms of some questions possibly being overlapping. We've used that format with councillors, we've used it with members of Parliament, and we've used it with Assembly members, and found that it's generally been found to be very acceptable by everybody. The one disappointment for me was your initial request to councillors to remove their dogs and cats from view. I was recently in attendance of a meeting with Welsh Government where a very senior official had a dog and a cat engaged in interesting activities in the background, and it certainly made the meeting a more exciting one.
Yeah.
As the Chief Executive has indicated, I'm joined today by our new Chief Executive, Jeremy Vaughan, and I'm very pleased indeed that in the very demanding process which led to his selection and appointment, both the leader, Councillor Hugh David, and the Chief Executive, Mark Shepherd, were able to join us in the way that I sought to involve as many of our partners as possible in that process, and able to have an exchange with the three candidates. I would also say that 3 candidates is quite remarkable, all 3 serving as Deputy Chief Constables in different forces. So I think we can be very confident indeed, especially because the independent assessor who gave a report to the Police and Crime Panel indicated the quality and integrity of the process. But obviously Jeremy, who has been appointed, has been Deputy Chief Constable, and before that Assistant Chief Constable, and before that served in a very distinguished form up to Chief Superintendent level in North Wales, so has a really in-depth understanding of everything to do with policing and partners and political activities across Wales. Chief Superintendent Dorian Lloyd, as well as the Chief Executive mentioned, is with us today. Dorian is about to participate in the youth retirement scheme that policing has, so he's not long with us, it's particularly useful very often at these events. Myself and the Chief Constable can give the overarching reports to councillors, and then if there are any difficult questions on local issues, we can pass them to the local commander. And Dorian, as I say, is about to retire after a very distinguished career with South Wales Police. We are in the centre of a pandemic at the moment, and I think it's worth saying how challenging that's been for policing, as indeed it has been for our partners in local government as well as health. And I'm very proud indeed of the way that our officers and PCSOs have played such a significant role. Obviously, this is a health emergency, and that being so, health has devolved. So it's been Welsh Government that has introduced the measures and the regulations within which we've had to work. Policing is not devolved, but again, I'm very proud of the way that the 4 Chief Constables and the 4 Police and Crime Commissioners have worked very closely together, and with our colleagues in Welsh Government and in local government. And that is a success story. I think colleagues in England are quite jealous of the degree of collaboration that we've been able to achieve. It's worked in a unique and effective way. And that's illustrated, for instance, in the fact that reopening of courts in Wales, and therefore people coming to justice, is way ahead of any region of England. That hasn't happened by accident. It's because we've worked together through criminal justice in Wales, as we've worked together through policing of Wales together to get the best for the communities that we serve. that partnership working at a local level as well is exemplary. And again, I give thanks for the cooperation we've had at the leadership level in the council, but also obviously between our officers on the ground and the officers of the council on the ground. That is really appreciated. We have faced one challenge after another, and I think we're going to over the months to come, but it's been a case of facing those challenges together. The next set of challenges, we're just past Halloween and Bonfire Night. The next set will be about Christmas and New Year, and we have urged Welsh Government to give us clarity by the end of this month on what that's going to look like, because otherwise police officers and indeed local authority officers are going to be in great difficulty unless people understand exactly what we can do and when. And I think it's pleasing the Welsh Government is seeking to work with the other devolved governments and central government to get us a single set of messages. Let's hope by the end of this month that we have that. During the pandemic, one of our biggest concerns has been hidden harms, that people forced to stay together by being in isolation might lead to an increase in domestic violence and abuse, child abuse, and some of the really difficult things that the police have to deal with. From the start, myself and the Chief Constable and our teams have worked very hard to get the message across that we're not closed down for non-pandemic issues during the period of the pandemic. And it's interesting that although some of the reporting was reduced, the actual level of arrest by South Wales Police for domestic violence was maintained at the pre-pandemic levels. One of the success stories as well is that we were committed, as I think certainly the leader and chief executive and perhaps other members are aware, to take the DRIVE programme, which has had considerable success in tackling the perpetrators of domestic violence and holding them to account and reducing the victimisation and very often re-victimisation that takes place. We were the first force to have 2 pilot areas identified, RCT and Merthyr and then Cardiff. That's been a great success story, recognised nationally, and we decided that we would roll it out when the funding ended for those pilots. For the whole of the South Wales area. I'm pleased to say that although there was a bit of delay from the intention of rolling that out to Bridgend and the Vale of Glamorgan in March, it went ahead during recent months, and we have also now rolled it out to Swansea and Neath Port Talbot, sort of stopping further offending, stopping violence. Prevention is absolutely at the core of everything we do. My final point would be that whereas initially during lockdown there was a reduction in demand on the police because people weren't able to get around, demand on the police is now back to and in some cases above pre-COVID demand. As well as obviously our officers having to respond and all of us having to work very hard to join up the dots in terms of the continuing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's very challenging, and of course the Chief Constable and Dorian in terms of this division have the responsibility of managing their resources to the best they can. Nevertheless, we continue with business as usual. We continue with the refreshing of the police and crime plan and the Chief Constable's delivery plan in order to make sure that we continue to deal with those things that harm and threaten and cause problems in our local communities. Obviously also we have some immense financial challenges. The government has given us the money for additional police officers and that's welcome, but they funded the additional officers. They haven't funded the gaps in the finances for the services and the people that we already employ. So next year is going to be very challenging financially, as I'm sure it is for local authorities and Welsh Government and everybody. And in the fullness of time, we will, of course, be discussing that with the Police and Crime Panel, with our local authority colleagues, and so on. But can I leave it there, Mr. Mayor, and invite Jeremy Vaughan to say a few words.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, please, the new Chief Constable, Jeremy Vaughan, can now present his report. Thank you very much.
So, pronounced down, Mr. Mayor. Just check that you can hear me okay.
I can indeed. I assume everyone else can. Otherwise, we'll have a cacophony of sound.
Indeed. So, pronounced down, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon to you and to everybody else. And first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. So perhaps I'll introduce myself a little bit more. Alan Michael was right; it was a challenging process. I looked significantly younger before the start of the process than I do now, but that's just the start of the challenge, no doubt. And it was a good rehearsal of my view of the future and the forward look, which I'll come on to in a minute. But so I've been with South Wales Police for 4.5 years. I was with North Wales Police for 19.5 years before that. I've pretty much pounded the beat in 2/3 of Wales's population now at various levels. So my early career was as part of neighbourhood and response policing. Then I moved into CID for the middle part of my career as a detective inspector, detective chief inspector, and then back into uniform and operations. I left North Wales as a chief superintendent. I was head of local policing there, having previously been head of ops there. And since I've been in South Wales, I've held 2 of the assistant chief constable out of the 3 portfolios. So one is the head of operations, the other is the head of local policing. I think that the simplest way to describe it is that by now my fingerprints are all over the place, which I think is quite a good thing, because hopefully it's making the transition to me taking over as chief a smooth one. Professionally, I talked a bit about being in CID in the middle part of my career. So I was accredited senior investigating officer, handling some serious crime investigations, firearms commander, public order commander, and just recently gave up being a counter-terrorism commander. So one of the few counter-terrorism commanders in the UK responsible for coordinating the manhunt in respect of pursuing a terrorist. I took some time during the last few years to develop my business skills. So I studied at Bangor University over a period of 5 years for a Masters in Business Administration, and it's been a busy time, because in that time I also have a family, a young family, 3 young children who my family moved down with me within 2 weeks of me relocating here in 2016. So that's a little bit about me. I'm here to stay. I had no intention of working outside of Wales or leaving Wales, and I have no intention of doing that. So I'm going to be in South Wales for a number of years, hopefully. So my priorities in the short term. So I think Mr. Michael mentioned the fact that the business of policing continues. It has done all the way through this really unusual 2020. It was particularly unusual in March, April, May, because we saw lots of demands, normal demands, ebbing off, particularly nighttime economy closing. But those that were intent on preying on the vulnerable, drug dealers, etc., still continued to find innovative ways of delivering their business, and we were able to pick them off during that period. But actually, since we've started, well, the summer felt a little bit more normal in terms of policing demands, and in fact, there were days over the summer months where we had more 999 calls than we've had before on record. So they were some of the busiest days that we'd had before. And I think as things sort of bounced back out of the initial lockdown, so did people's misbehaviour at the time. So that kept us extremely busy. So the crime, the serious crime, the mental health demands, the antisocial behaviour, the sexual offences, the robberies, they all continued, and they continue to this day. But of course, alongside that, we in the short term, are playing a hugely important role in the coordinated partnership response to the coronavirus pandemic. My police officers, my men and women, my boys and girls are out there every day facing the challenges of delivering a policing service, whilst also facing people who are potentially afflicted with this terrible virus. And the level of assaults on police officers has gone up during this period because some people have thought it's clever to cough all over police officers and suggest that they've got coronavirus. So naturally, we've taken a very robust stance to those people. I've been fixated in this period around the tone and style of our policing. So what we want to do is make sure that we continue to follow the principles of policing by consent. But as time's gone on, we've become more intolerant of people who are flouting the regulations. And you may or may not know, Mayor, but I know a number of people on the call do, is that we've invested in a joint enforcement team with Bridgend County Council to make sure that collectively we are dealing appropriately with people who think the rules don't apply to them. And then the third point I'll say is that I was asked recently in several television interviews, what keeps me awake at night? Well, many things have the potential to keep me awake at night, as you can imagine. The one thing I'm most troubled about, amongst the things I'm most troubled about rather than the short term, is the well-being of our people. So we're all suffering with this pandemic. Some of us with loved ones close to us have become unwell. Others is that we just can't simply see our loved ones, and we're expected to put ourselves in harm's way. So I'm turning my attention a lot in this period to the well-being of the workforce, to make sure that we make sure our people feel like we're doing everything we can to make it the safest and most comfortable operating environment for them, because we do ask them to put themselves in harm's way. I'm also got a forward look. Naturally, I would, as Chief Constable, somebody's got to be thinking about organisational development. Somebody's got to be thinking about what the organisation looks like during 2021 and beyond. And whilst I too, and I won't repeat Alan's words, I too am really worried about the financial outlook, as I'm sure many people on the call are. I'm working hard to think about what the Chief's delivery plan for 2021 to 2024 looks like. I'm working with Mr. Michael's team around his refresh of the police and crime plan to make sure that there is a real synergy between those two. The one thing I'll say is that we really do start from a position of strength in South Wales Police. So we're a winning team, and I've taken over a winning team by all assessments. Relative crime performance, the assessment of the inspector at public perception levels of the service put us amongst the very best police forces in England and Wales. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the strong values that we have as an organisation. Whilst we're very proud in South Wales, we're very positive, and we believe strongly in neighbourhood policing and policing communities. I also want us to be progressive, so you will have seen us developing technologies such as the use of facial recognition technology, which I didn't read nationally on, but you'll also have seen us looking at innovative ways of thinking about offenders. Alan Michael has spoken about Drive, but there have been several ways we have challenged the status quo in Wales and in the UK about how we think about diverting people from the criminal justice system. The first thing a new chief executive of an organisation does is to pause and reflect on the mission, vision, values, I suppose. Our mission remains the same, to keep South Wales safe. And when our backs are up against the wall because we're faced with a particularly turbulent time, that's our focus, and that's the message that I give to our people, is that our job is to keep people safe. So I'm conscious of everybody's time. Just talk briefly about the plan, and it will be very briefly because I've asked my executive team to continue to work on its development, and you'll hear more about it during the early part of 2021. But I see us achieving a real balance in dealing and tackling with those people who think it's okay to come into South Wales and prey on our vulnerable people, sell drugs to them, target them, and dealing with them very robustly, being really sharp around tackling drug dealers, being really sharp around tackling offenders who are determined on peddling things that can cause real harm to our communities. But whilst at the other side of it is challenging the status quo a little, and how we deal with partners, to which I am completely committed, in thinking differently about how we provide interventions to people who are in real need and in real crisis. So, for example, I get to meet a drug addict who thinks it's good to be a drug addict. So the criminal justice system might not always be the best way to deal with that person. So for us to be part of a group that able to get to them the help that they need to stop them on that offending cycle is really important to me, whilst at the same time taking the doors off drug dealers' houses. I want us to continue to be excellent at the point of contact, Mr. Mayor. Our control room, our call centre, has amongst the best performance in England and Wales. And whilst at times that can feel frustrating to people who want to get hold of us when we're particularly busy, I want us to build on the work that we've started there, and just to make sure that we've got the right skill in that room to deal with demands at the first point of contact. And we'll continue to invest in that. And it's something I've started and instigated since I've been in the organisation, and something I'll continue to drive as chief. We've worked very closely with Bridgend Council in the development of early intervention services. We've worked with learning from the adverse childhood experience research. We've been at the vanguard of developing initiatives with partners to give people the services they need as soon as they need them. So both at a partnership effort and at a very local community policing effort, I expect our people to be excellent problem solvers, so that they can both know how they can solve problems by their own initiatives, but also is that they empower communities to be much more problem solving themselves. I've talked a bit about the people of the organisation in terms of their own well-being and their own safety. I think the summer period, the Black Lives Matter campaign has caused us to further reflect on the representation of our workforce, and we've worked really hard over the last few years on that, and we've got lots to do. And Mr. Michael and I have been talking about how we challenge the status quo there. But secondly, I'm really determined that the people of South Wales Police become the best diversity leaders they can be. So I really want them to understand the prevalence of inequality, prejudice, disadvantage. So much so that we've instigated an organisational conversation. We've got through 500 people so far, where by the end of it, I'm expecting our people to be even better at understanding the prevalence of disadvantage in our communities, be it race or be it anything else. And the final thing I'll say on people is that I think the sun rises and sets on that frontline supervision. Sergeants are such an important rank to me, and Dorian's been doing some work with me on this, and I'm determined that we make our frontline supervisors the most capable and confident people we could be. So no longer will it be acceptable for me that we promote somebody and give them the course that helps them in the role 6 months after being promoted. I want us to really invest in that leadership before that leadership hits the ground. And the team are busy working on plans in that regard. A couple more. I think greater scope for us to be more digital in the way that we deliver services. It's still quite an analogue experience contacting South Wales Police. And I think that in a crisis, I think that's perfect. And you know, in 99.7% of cases, you'll get the phone answered on 999 within 10 seconds. And that should always be the case. But there's much more we can do digitally in terms of people's contact with us, in terms of transaction with us, that I've asked the team to focus on. And I'll probably close and happy to sort of take any questions in accordance with the instructions that have been provided. By saying this will be Dorian Lloyd's last outing, no doubt, one of the last outings with you as a collective. And I know that you've probably not seen Dorian as much because it's only in the last year that he's taken responsibility for Bridgend as well as other areas of that Mid Glamorgan area. I didn't want to leave this meeting without saying how impressed I've been consistently with Dorian Lloyd's leadership, both locally and as part of South Wales Police, and he will be a great loss to us. He is retiring after 30 years police service, and whilst he's still a very young man, he's no doubt pretty exhausted because he's had to deal with bosses like me for the last few years, and that's bound to tire anybody out. But all joking aside, he's a phenomenal leader, and he'll be sorely missed. Mr. Mayor, that's me a really, really rapid canter through. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief Constable. It certainly brought back a lot of memories for me, some of the matters you were touching on, and it's nice to hear that South Wales Police is still considered one of the best. So, as Mr. Michael indicated, there are a number of councillors who've indicated that they wish to ask questions. So I will ask them to ask their questions and then you to answer at the end of that. So the first question that I have is from Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner and Chief Constable. I think my question is probably aimed at the Chief Constable. Undeniably, we've seen a massive increase in vulnerable people because of the coronavirus, and we're seeing more reliance on vulnerable people with services like volunteer services, people getting prescriptions and food supplies for vulnerable people, and we're also seeing a massive increase in people in receipt of universal credit. Now, I've heard anecdotal evidence, not necessarily in the Bridgend area, of unscrupulous gangs masquerading as volunteers, pretending to be volunteers to help vulnerable people get food and prescriptions and then getting access to their home, and also hearing about gangs targeting people in receipt of universal credits, who especially people who are getting advance payments as well to try and get their benefit money. So you talked a lot about protecting vulnerable people and partnership working. So I'm just wondering, how are you working with organisations such as the Department for Work and Pensions and these groups that are setting up these volunteer groups, such as Barvo, for example, in our area, to make sure that vulnerable people are being protected? The reason why I asked this question, in my ward, there was a horrible story of an elderly lady who was severely beaten by somebody pretending to be her carer as well. So I'm particularly interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is from Councillor Rod Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Jeremy, congratulations and welcome. Alan, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for coming along today. Much enjoyed your presentation. Couple of things I might, Alan, if I ask you, and then you can ponder. First of all, what's the impact of Cardiff being a capital on your budget's expenditure, etc.? And secondly, do you have any thoughts about your next precept? But I'll leave that with you, Alan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. The next question is from Councillor John Paul Blundell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner and Chief Constable, for coming today and for that very informative, if not brief, presentation. Can you inform this council the current levels of police and support staff compared to the levels in 2010? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Nice and crisp there. Next one is Councillor Hussain, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Really great to know what you will be doing, really. My question is about dying packed meetings. I know you were never a fan of these packed meetings, but how are you going to be in touch with the local communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Next one is Councillor Voisey, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. My question really is about, we know how wonderful many of the things you do are, the mental health services you provide and serious crime, but many of my constituents suffer with low-level crime, antisocial behaviour, moving traffic offences which seem to have been completely forgotten about, and there is a question over the 101 service, which most people think is really inappropriate and doesn't deliver. And I would like to see what you can do about the low-level antisocial and traffic offences, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Voisey. The last one I have, and I think this better be the last one, is Councillor Ross Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you also to our colleagues in South Wales Police for being with us. Virtually an identical question to Councillor Voisey. interested to hear the panel's views on whether the 101 service is fit for purpose. Like many members, I receive many calls from constituents frustrated with the waiting time or the fact that the call hangs up. I had reason to contact 101 myself. I couldn't actually get through to the service after selecting South Wales Police. So just wondering whether or not the colleagues think that this service is fit for purpose for constituents.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Well, over to you now, Commissioner and Chief Constable.
Shall I go first, and then Jeremy will obviously have operational things to say, I think, on most of the questions, and there may be things that Dorian Lloyd will want to comment on a local level. As far as working with the voluntary sector is concerned, we work very closely with the sector indeed, particularly in relation to things like violence against women and girls, domestic violence and abuse and so on. I think we were the first force to have a compact with the voluntary sector, which was arranged with the councils of voluntary service across the 7 local authority areas in South Wales, and they remain a very important partner for us. Secondly, the question about
Sorry, Mr. Michael, we've lost you. Hello, Mr. Michael. Chief Constable Jeremy, can you come in and answer some of the questions while we try and get a link back up to the Commissioner?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Thank you.
So, Councillor Tim Thomas, we'll come back to that one because I'll let Mr. Michael go first in terms of our relationships with third sector organisation and partners. But I'm really interested to know about local specific examples because and Dorian might come into that. I'll come back to that one. So Councillor Shaw raised the question about capital city impact. I think it was directed, well, the preset one is definitely directed at Mr. Michael, so I'll let Mr. Michael talk about that. Capital city impact, so we calculated cost us about £4 million a year in ordinary terms. So it's a little different at the moment, isn't it? Because we're not having events, but when Cardiff is in full swing, the capital city costs us about £4 million a year on top of delivering the policing service, for which we're not funded. So we're in the process of trying to influence the comprehensive spending review, the review of police funding, lobby about how that is recognised, because it does cause a hit for the whole of South Wales, the funding arrangement for capital cities. So it's one of the anomalies in South Wales police funding that we're trying to push hard for central government on in Westminster. The preset one is for Alan, isn't it? Councillor Blundell, the 2010 numbers versus now, I would be misquoting if I gave you in number terms. The number I refer to is £60 million. So since 2010, we've effectively, our budget is £60 million lighter. So that is a significant chunk of our £360 million budget is £60 million lighter. That has translated into a significant number of people. In terms of those numbers, I can get them for you, and there'll be plenty of presentations available for me to get it. But I'd be misquoting if I gave you the specific number. But it's a £60 million dint in the budget. Councillor Hussain, packed meeting. So I'll let Dorian talk locally about local arrangements. But what I will say is so within the last couple of years, I instigated a review and led on a review of neighbourhood policing. As the chief, as long as I can afford it, neighbourhood policing will be an absolute priority for me. Understanding, I opened to 24 new PCSO recruits on Monday this week. And my message to them will be a consistent message for the whole organisation from here on in, and that is I expect you all to understand your communities, to know what's going on there, to understand the data and the demands that we capture, but also to understand locally how people feel. Dorian, you might want to come in that one. I'll invite you to speak in a minute, but you might want to address that locally as well. If I can deal with the 101 service, So at the moment, we've since the 23rd of March, we have handled 330,000 calls on the 101 service, and when we survey the public, they give pretty high levels of satisfaction overall. But of course, what happens is sometimes people pick up the phone to us at times when we're really busy, and they wait, and it's people never wait on 999 in South Wales. They never wait on 999. On a non-emergency, when it's busy, sometimes they wait. I would love to be in a position to offer local area control rooms where that service might feel different, but that is expensive, and we are now a £60 million lighter budget than we were since 2010. Lower level untouched labour and traffic offences. My view on the importance of neighbour policing partly answers that. I think we're all better for knowing and understanding about.
Can I just interrupt you there, Chief Constable? Somebody's got their microphone open and it's making us difficult to hear you. Could you all please check your microphones, please, and switch them off if you're not speaking?
I think you may find that it's mine, having just returned, but I'll turn off until Jeremy finishes.
Yes, we've got you loud and clear now. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Carry on. Thank you, Chief Constable. Do you wish to carry on?
I inadvertently hit my mute button then, so I sorry about that. So
we're all learning.
We're all. It's the new language, isn't it? You're muting, yes. You're not muting. Your hands up, the hands not up. It's a real challenge for us all. But so low level antisocial behaviour and traffic offences, they do remain a priority. Clearly, there are times when we have to prioritise where we put our resource to the most serious harm. But I go back to my point about neighbourhood policing, about problem solving, but local PCSOs and local neighbourhood officers. My expectation is that they will have a good grip on what's happening locally, a good understanding. They will work with communities around them. And just today, I signed a load of letters thanking members of the public for writing into me and thanking members of staff for the way that they responded to particular matters of antisocial behaviour. So I am heartened by the fact that we offer a neighbour policing service that many police forces in England and Wales just do not offer now. But if part of the question at Councillor Voisey was the extent to which it remains important to me, it does remain important to me. Just because I'm talking about dealing with the high harm stuff doesn't mean that my expectation isn't that neighbourhood policing and local policing isn't very in touch with what's happening locally. Dorian, did you want to come in on that point specifically, particularly around the Councillor Hussein's point and Councillor Voisey's point about understanding what goes on in local communities and local lower level ASB?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vaughan, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just moving on from what Mr. Vaughan has said, it is an absolute daily priority for us to understand the issues within all of our communities and respond to them with as much vigour as we can. And obviously antisocial behaviour and issues such as moving road traffic offences has been highlighted forms part of our everyday problem solving approach. We are very committed to success in this area, and that's what our neighbourhood policing teams are directed towards. When they're sent out on patrol every day and tasked and briefed to that extent. So in terms of the concerns which have been raised today, they are a concern for us and an absolute priority for us, always have been and have continued to be throughout these challenging past 6 or 8 months. In terms of the PAC meetings, we are committed to engaging with our communities in whichever way is the most appropriate and also the most beneficial. And it has been a challenge to continue our PAC meetings over recent months due to the pandemic and the social distancing rules. But we have undertaken many through, as we are today, remotely. As soon as we are in a position to do so, we return to the more conventional packed meetings that we've had, and we're committed to doing that. And I know that my successor, Chief Superintendent Steve Jones, will also be as equally committed as I am. But at the moment, we're in a situation where we have to find creative ways, really, to, as I said, to engage with the public rather than sitting down, in a meeting format in person in this current climate.
Thank you, Mr.
Can I go back in then, Mr. Mayor? I'm tempted to say I've been thrown out of better places than this, but it wouldn't be an entirely fair comment. If I can just pick up, I think the point I was thrown out, I was responding to the Cardiff burden of the capital and making the point that Edinburgh got a premium to recognise its capital burden. The force that covered Edinburgh, the South Wales Police Force have never had financial recognition of the additional costs of about £4 million a year of covering the capital city of Wales, and we continue to make that case to the Home Office and central government. The question associated with that was about the precept for next year. The starting point has to be, what is the Home Office going to do in terms of the police grant? Roughly half our finances come from central government, from the Home Office through police grant, and I've asked for some work to be done to say what that police grant ought to be in order for us to simply maintain the quality of policing, as well as accepting the additional officers that are currently being funded by the Home Office. And it will depend the extent to which the Home Office meets that requirement. I think it would be very ambitious to want to do more than that. Will give us the starting point for deciding what the precept will be for next year. We are also going through a consultation with the public at the moment. We're getting very good responses. We get more responses each year, by the way, and generally people are very, very supportive of the police, but of course recognising to the fact that the pandemic has had an enormous impact on people's income. So I'm afraid I can't answer with a suggestion of what the precept might be. That we have to decide by the end of January and make a submission to the Police and Crime Panel, and I need all the facts, including what the Chief Constable needs in order to do the job, and what the Home Office is going to give us in the police grant before being able to come to the conclusions on that. I think Jeremy has picked up the other issue, so I won't repeat by going over ground that's already been covered. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Michael. When we lost you, you were halfway through answering a question from Councillor Tim Thomas, and he has asked if that could be expanded upon. Councillor Thomas, would you just like to come back in and briefly remind us what your question was?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Commissioner. You were halfway through telling us how you're working with voluntary organisations, and we're also looking forward to other bodies such as the DWP in protecting vulnerable people on benefits. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry. Obviously, I was kicked out a little earlier, so I must have been talking to myself in answering that question. I do apologise. Technology is a wonderful thing when it works. Yes, what I was saying was that we were the first force to enter into a compact with the voluntary sector, with the councils of voluntary service across South Wales. We work very closely, particularly with those organisations concerned with vulnerable people. I provide funding, particularly for work with victims, whereas we don't work directly with the Department of Work and Pensions, they take part in some of the discussions we have with the voluntary sector and other agencies about supporting people. Clearly, as you'll appreciate, our concern is mainly with three aspects: support for victims, the work of preventing things happening in the first place, in which South Wales Police has been not just a national leader but a world leader of the way that as a joint leadership between myself and the Chief Constable, we, for instance, worked on interventions that recognise the impact of adverse childhood experiences and seek to ameliorate those impacts, the way that we work with youth offending teams, the way that our South Wales Police Youth Trust funds activities, a number of them in the Bridgend area, to engage with young people and try to get in before they get drawn into trouble. There's also the South Wales Police Youth Volunteers activity that's been obviously considerably curtailed as a result of the pandemic. So there's quite a wide range of activities that are directly relevant to the work of the voluntary sector, focused primarily on those things that relate, as I say, to those three aspects of prevention, support of victims, and early intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. I'm going to call the Chief Constable back in now. I know he's been anxious to say something. Then I'm going to ask the leader, Councillor Hugh Thomas, who wishes also to make a comment, and then I think that will conclude this part of the afternoon's meeting. So, Chief Constable, if you would like to come in, please.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to build on a couple of points that Mr. Michael made, and as a specific ask for, I hadn't forgotten your question, Councillor Thomas. I would just please do me a favour, if you've got any. You hear any anecdote or stories about people who are being targeted in any way, will you make sure that they get reported? Either ask them to report, because often, or not often, sometimes you find that the matters don't report, and until we know, it's hard for us to respond, because there's something about me as chief wanting the response to people who've been targeted to be very solid. So we put in a good investigation, we make sure we find them. So that'd be my first point. The second point to make is, you know, as chief, you know, I share Mr. Michael's commitment to working in partnership around this early intervention piece. So we've got, and we're funding these things on a temporary basis, and we're still trying to push others to help us fund them. But we've got mental health services working in the control room. We've got emergency duty social workers working in the control room on a pilot basis. We've been working hard not to re-traumatise people who are homeless, and you know, we're desperate to try and give them the help and support they need, recognising we need to deliver policing and all that goes with delivering policing. So I just wanted to add on a couple of things, but my commitment to that partnership working is complete, and particularly those voluntary services and building those local relationships is really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. Leader, Councillor Hugh Thomas, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And can I thank the Commissioner for inviting myself and the Chief Executive to be part of the recruitment process for the new Chief Constable, and congratulations to Jeremy. It was the reason why we had to leave the last full council meeting early. I can indeed confirm that it was a very robust process. He was grilled for at least an hour and a half, Jeremy, and it was a very competitive field, and he was the best of that very, very strong set of candidates. So congratulations to Jeremy. And in that interview, his commitment to partnership was clear, and the fact that one of his very first meetings that he's attending is at Bridgend County Borough Council is also a reflection of that. I think is it week 2, Jeremy? So that is a sign of our relationship. The relationship isn't always hunky-dory, is it, Commissioner? We do have differences now and again, but what I welcome is that we have honest and frank exchange of views, and we find a solution. And part of that is having local leaders who are responsive to the needs of communities, and I want to thank Dorian for his leadership as a divisional commander. He has been in frontline policing for 30 years, as the Chief Constable has outlined, and as Councillor Watts knows, and as Councillor Jones knows, that's a very long time, isn't it, to be in policing and on the front line, and he very much deserves his retirement. And I have to say, he can wear as a badge of honour that during his period at Bridgend, we have managed to keep county lines out of Bridgend County Borough. That is a poison that is spreading across the UK. It is an extremely dangerous activity, and it is a reflection of the fantastic policing that we have locally, that those serious criminals, dangerous criminals, have been kept out of Bridgend, and I know it's something that the new Chief Constable is equally committed to. And I'm also very pleased that Jeremy's background is in anti-terrorism, because we need to be ever vigilant of the risks of that too. So sorry that was a little long, Mr. Mayor, but I did want to pay tribute to our outgoing Chief Superintendent and welcome on a new Chief Constable. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and my apologies for calling you Hugh Thomas instead of Hugh David.
I've been called a lot worse, that's okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It was pointed out to me, slip of the tongue. Right, that concludes this. I must now move the recommendation, or have the recommendation moved, that members note the presentation by the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable of the South Wales Police, and that members note the future presentation to the December meeting of Council as outlined in paragraph 4.2. Can I have that moved, please?
Move.
Seconded?
Second.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chief Constable. And Dorian, have a long, happy and healthy retirement. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, members. We'll move on to item 7, report of the Corporate Director Communities, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Lord Mayor, Council. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Janine Nightingale. I'm the Corporate Director for Communities in Bridgend. And with me today on the call at Council, I've got Jonathan Parsons, who's my Group Manager for Planning and Development, and I've also got Lewis Pennell, who's one of my Senior Planning Officers. So the purpose of this report, Lord Mayor and Council, is to seek endorsement of the Regional Technical Statement for Mineral Planning. And this covers a 25-year period up to 2041, but we review it every 5 years. So this statement is required to meet National Planning Policy, and that's Minerals Technical Advice Note 1. And this report also seeks endorsement of our statement of sub-regional collaboration. Now, this regional technical statement is a very lengthy document, as you will have seen, and we've sent it out to you. So what I'm going to ask is whether Lewis Pennell, our planning officer, who is involved in this, would give us a very short verbal presentation covering the most important points for us to note. And then we would be happy to take any questions that Council may have afterwards. Lord Mayor, if you were happy with that.
Yes, I'm very happy. And just to correct you, I'm not Lord Mayor. This is Worshipful the Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the honour. Thank you for the honour.
You'll become.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Lewis, please, would you give us the presentation?
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to seek endorsement of the Regional Technical Statement in order to meet the requirements of National Planning Policy and agree the progression of the Statement of Sub-Regional Collaboration. Minerals Technical Advice Note 1 requires the preparation of regional technical statements for the areas covered by both the South Wales and North Wales regional aggregates working parties. Now, the regional technical statement documents for both regions were completed in 2008 and are required to be reviewed every 5 years. This is the second review of which commenced in 2018 and will ensure that any major changes to supply and demand can be addressed and the statement can be changed or modified as appropriate. Second review methodology has made an attempt to reflect planned future requirements for housing construction activity and to avoid perpetuating historical supply patterns in areas where there is scope to encourage more sustainable patterns of supply. So South Wales has been split into 7 sub-regions which reflect distinct market areas, and Bridgend has been grouped within the Cardiff City sub-region. Now, each sub-region is required to prepare a statement of sub-regional collaboration to confirm that all local planning authorities within a particular sub-region accept the individual apportionments for aggregates for their individual authority areas. Bridgend, through the LDP process, is required to meet the apportionment set out in the statement, and the total requirement is for 17 million tonnes of crushed rock over the next 25 years. However, it's important to note that Bridgend has a surplus of existing permitted reserves in the region of 27 million tonnes of crushed rock to put towards this requirement. Therefore, no further allocations for future working are required to be identified within the local development plan. So the recommendation is that Council endorse the regional technical statement and to allow the progression of the statement of sub-regional collaboration. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Lewis. The recommendation is, do you wish to come in, Janine, before I put the recommendation? No,
that's
okay.
fine. Thank you, Mr.
To members then, the recommendation is that Council endorses the regional technical statement. Can I have a mover, please?
Move.
Second?
Second. Second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this, please? Okay, I take silence as a negative on that. Thank you very much, Janine and Louise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8 of the agenda then, which is the report of the Interim Chief Officer Finance Performance and Change. And that'll be Jill, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer Finance Performance and Change. The report you have in front of you today at Council, you will be familiar with. This is the half-year update on Treasury management activities. But the bit that perhaps is slightly less familiar is there's an update on the proposed changes to the Treasury management strategy for 2020-21, which I will be asking Council to approve at the end of the presentation. So you will also hear me refer to our Treasury Management advisors throughout the presentation, who you will have heard of before, which are Arling Close. And at paragraph 3.4, you'll see that I can confirm the outcome of the tender for our Treasury Management advisors who were successful in securing the contract for the next 4 years. So we're very pleased, obviously, to have them on board. So if I just take you briefly through the current situation, as at the 30th of September, which is the end of Q2, the Council's borrowing was around 97 million, which is shown in Table 1, which has been at the same level for a number of years and is for the Public Works Loans Board, PWLB, and the lender's option, borrower's option, the LOBOs that I've referred to previously. The average rate of interest on those loans is 4.69%, which looks pretty high when I come on to talk about the rest of the strategy. So the only other long-term liability is the PFI scheme that, again, I've raised in all the Treasury Management reports to Council, and that's for the provision of the school at my steg, which will reduce over the remaining 13 and a half years of the scheme. In terms of our investments, the Q2 position shows a total investment of around 64 million, with an average interest rate of 0.24%. And that's quite a reduction from Q1, which was 0.45%. The majority of our investments are held with other local authorities, around about 28 million, which remain a key investment vehicle for the council. The investments in other local authorities offer security with a return and reasonable flexibility in terms of our investment duration, and that's a really important point that I want to make to Council today. As you can see from the table, the current return is 0.49% from these investments compared to a bank base rate of 0.1%. So we are still getting a reasonable rate on those investments. We also invest in money market funds, which I brought to Council before. They offer a better return than central government's debt management office, and the balance is around 17 million at a rate of 0.07%. So the change in recent months, as you probably will have seen from some of the news, the Debt Management Office on the 25th of September changed their interest rates on deposits. So for any deposits up to 2 weeks, the Debt Management Office has applied a negative interest rate of minus 0.03 and 0% for any deposits between 2 weeks and 3 months. Now, in all my years, I think, in the public sector, I don't think I've ever had to pay to put an investment into the Debt Management Office. So obviously you can't get a negative interest rate paid. So the council would get back less than we originally invested. Now, it's not really a huge problem. It's very small amounts. It's still secure, and we would get back what we'd put in minus the negative rate of interest. So we're only going to use the Debt Management Office as a last resort. So hence the change in the strategy that I want to refer to shortly. So given that position, the importance of lending to other local authorities and maximising the use of the monetary funds is crucial in managing our cash flow. When we invest surplus monies, we only invest in approved bodies and in line with our advisors' advice. And Table 2 sets out the level of borrowing the council would ordinarily need to finance the capital expenditure. But as you probably appreciate, through COVID, there's been significant slippage in the capital programme, which I have brought to council previously. And therefore, certainly the level of borrowings that we're likely to need will be somewhat less. So, as was the case the last quarter, the bank interest rate remains at 0.1%. I don't think that's going to change. But obviously, we've had to manage a significant level of cash flows over the period of COVID as a result of a range of both UK and Welsh Government financial support. Now, obviously, we're delighted to have that level of support through these difficult times, but that has meant that we've got significant amounts of cash flow variation to manage. So the job retention scheme, self-employed income support scheme, the business rate grants were more than 30 million, small charities business rates, local government hardship fund, lockdown grants, etc. All of which has caused quite a lot of variance in the amount that we've got to invest. Our borrowing strategy remains a low-risk balance between securing low interest costs and achieving certainty over the period. And I think it's fair to say, you've heard me say this before, our investment strategy remains security first, liquidity, and lastly, yield or interest rate. So with the current interest rates, the strategy will be to continue to use local authority and money market funds to invest firstly before considering the DMO. If you look at table 4, it provides a breakdown of where the council has its money invested and interest rates, and table 6 for which duration. I should add that this isn't surplus cash that isn't committed. We haven't got significant amounts of cash hanging around that we haven't got anything to do with. I think it's more managing the different flows of cash as it comes in and as it goes out from the council. So I do want to stress that in case anybody thought that we had significant amounts of surplus cash. And so the review of the Treasury management strategy, I've outlined the problems in terms of investing in the debt management office. And so we're recommending that we increase the limits for the total invested in money market funds from 20 million to 30 million to give us an increase in the number of funds that we can use while continuing to maintain security and liquidity, obviously through diversification. We're also recommending increasing the limit on registered providers from 3 million to 5 million, although at this point in time we do not have any money in registered providers, but it will give greater opportunity to invest with such an organisation as we believe the 3 million limit is too restrictive. So that was all I wanted to present to Council today, and I'm asking Council to approve the annual Treasury management activities for the first 2 quarters of the year and to approve the proposed changes to the strategy.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jill. Can I have a mover for that, please?
Move.
Yeah,
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. I got thank you. That's moved and seconded. I have 2 questions. First one from Councillor Howell Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I first of all offer my thanks and gratitude to the finance team, because we've had a very difficult period. Jill did mention all the extra cash that we've had to manage that's come through from Welsh Government. Very welcome though it is. There's certainly been a difficult task getting that out to the door to the local businesses that desperately require that money. And I think she also makes a distinct distinction here. This is how we manage our money, not how we spend our money. And I think that's an important distinction. And it's very important that we make best use of our money if we've got some short-term surpluses, and we don't just put it in a shoebox under the bed. So we need to make that money work hard for us so we can get a return on it if possible. So I'm happy to move the recommendation, and I support the increases in the funds to invest in various places. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Matthew Voisey, please.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with Councillor Williams and thank the team for what must be a very frustrating period of time with, I can't get my head around negative interest rates, and I'm sure with the amount of money that Westminster are giving Wales through the Assembly that it is quite a difficult task. One of the question I really want to come to is regarding local authorities. Now, they've always been a safe bet, but we've seen recently the Labour-run Croydon Authority in trouble, and I just wanted to be reassured that we don't just see local authorities as a completely safe haven like the Treasury, because there is potential rocky seas ahead.
Okay, is that the question?
Can I answer, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please, Jill.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Voicey. It's a very good question and one that we have asked ourselves. The fact is that local authorities are still extremely safe, and we do take advice, as I said, from our Treasury Management Advisors, Arlene Close, and therefore we wouldn't be investing in any local authority that had any sign of any financial difficulties. So you're quite right to raise the Croydon issue. Myself and the team did have a discussion. We don't have any money, just to reassure you, with Croydon. But local authorities don't generally go bust, and therefore they are still safe to place our money. And we've had no defaults, touch wood, but we've had no defaults at all in any of the investments that we've made. So just to reassure you.
Thank you, Jill. The report has been moved and seconded. Is everybody in agreement? I'll take silence.
All in favour?
Thank you very much, everybody. We now move on to item number 9, and that is the report of the Interim Chief Officer, Finance and Performance and Change. Jill again, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. So the purpose of the report before you is to provide Council with details of the Council tax base and the estimated collection rate for 21-22. This is a report that you'll be used to getting at this time of year, and it's very important in terms of setting the council tax base for council tax and also for the Welsh Government to provide us with the revenue support grant. So it determines the amount of council tax which can be raised as part of the council's budget, and we are required to set this base before the 31st of December each year. So that's a requirement by the Welsh Government for both our revenue support grants and also to work out how we fund the 21-22 council budget. So you'll see from the report, properties are set into 9 validation bands, and those are multiplied by a given factor to bring everything into a band D equivalent, and that's all shown at paragraph 3.2. Hence, the tax base represents the number of chargeable dwellings expressed as band D equivalents. So, so no change from what you've been used to on previous years. At 4.1, you'll see the council tax base, and I want to just draw your attention to the estimated collection rate of 97.5%, which is 0.5% reduced from last year. Last year we estimated a collection rate of 98%, and I'm sure you'll understand that is a reflection of the circumstances that we find ourselves in during this global pandemic, and we feel that it would be prudent to set the estimated collection rate at a lower rate. Just to reassure Council, for revenue support grant purposes, the collection rates are assumed to be 100%, so it will have no bearing on the grants that we get from the Welsh Government. The tax base is used for all precepting authorities, and separate calculations are provided to the town and community councils for calculating that precept, and those are all set out in Appendix A. So I take you, Mr. Mayor, to the recommendations at 9.1.
Thank you, Jill. The recommendation is it's a requirement for the to approve the council tax base and collection rate for 2021-22 as shown in paragraph 4.1 of this report, and to approve the tax bases for the town and community areas set out in Appendix A. Do I have a mover, please?
Move the report. Second.
Thank you so much. I've got 2 questions. Deputy Leader Howell Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I am happy to move this report I think it's a prudent move that we adjust our council tax base. We are certainly in very uncertain times. This doesn't mean that we don't expect to collect all council tax that's owed to the authority. It's just a recognition that that with people are in difficult times, this might take a little longer to collect. So, you know, we're not writing cash off by any means. We will collect all the money that's due to us, but this is just a prudent move, to recognising the difficult times that we're in.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Matthew Voisey, please.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the Deputy Leader, it's my usual question, so he's probably got the answer at his fingertips. What is the current collection rate? What evidence have you used to make this adjustment to the collection rate from 98 to 97.5? And what does that 0.5% mean in real money? And the big question is it sufficient with the current economic situation? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councillor Voisey. Obviously, we did have a very slow sort of start to the year, but that is picking up and progressing now, and we expect to get as close to that 98% as possible. It's very difficult to tell at this stage what the final rate will be, but you know, we are working within the confines that we've got to collect all the council tax that's owed to the authority. And I can just reiterate, you know, we got to be realistic about this. We are in very difficult financial times, and I can just say that you know, it's prudent that we readjust our council tax. Doesn't mean we're writing it off. It just means that it might take a little longer to collect.
So sorry, can I have the question answered, please?
Councillor Voisey, what point did you wish to answer there?
Well, I asked what the current collection rates were, what the evidence was to reduce the rate, and what the rate difference actually means in terms of real money, and none of those questions have been answered.
Well, that collection rate changes on a daily basis, Councillor Voisey.
Okay, Jill, do you want to come in?
Yeah, could I just add to what the Deputy Leader has said? At the end of October, which is the most recent figures that we've got, Councillor Voisey, the collection rate was around about 64.24%, which is down from 65.81% in the same period last year. So, so as the Deputy Leader has said, the collection rate varies from day to day depending on the amount of money that's paid in from previous years as well as this year. I should add that we haven't been able to arrange any court hearings, and we took a very softly approach in terms of debt collection at the beginning of the year under instructions, obviously from the Welsh Government. So we won't have a court case until January, which will mean that obviously we are behind in terms of collection of arrears. We're probably about 1.5 million down at the moment in terms of collection, but as the Deputy Leader has said, that we're hoping that will pick up because we allowed people to defer payments at the beginning of the year, and also to reprofile over 12 months rather than the usual 10. And in terms of the gap, the 0.5% represents round about 500,000. And in answer to the question, is that enough? I think the Deputy Leader has said that is our best estimate at the moment, but who knows at this point in time whether that will be sufficient. We're obviously doing everything we can to collect as much as possible, but we are in unprecedented times. We've never had to get to this stage in terms of allowing people to do as much deferment. We've had a lot of cancelled direct debits. We're hoping that those will pick up again. but we will continue to reassess the situation and come back to council.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I have a question from Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of council tax payments not being met, there's obviously two types of groups of people. There's those who can't pay, and there might be a smaller group of those who won't pay. I'm just wondering, what methods do we use to tell those two groups apart? I am aware of some local authorities that use data modelling from credit agencies to see, look at people's credit history files to see if they do have the ability to pay. I'd rather hope that we are sympathetic to those who can't pay and perhaps less so with those who won't. I just wonder if you could add something to that, please.
Do you want to answer that one, Jill, as well?
Yeah. Deputy, are you happy for me to?
Yeah, happy to answer that.
Okay. Just to reassure you, Councillor Thomas, we discuss payments quite extensively with every single defaulter, for want of a better word. We do go to great lengths to understand individual circumstances, and we offer a huge variety of payment methods and attachment of earnings and all sorts of alternative ways of being able to discharge the debt. We only go to court in extreme circumstances, and obviously that is when people won't pay. And I think you will see that we get very, very few complaints about our processes in terms of chasing debt, but nevertheless we have got a significant level of debt, and obviously, as you'll appreciate, if people cannot pay, then generally they will have council tax reduction or some other form of help. So we only take court cases in extreme circumstances, obviously, but we haven't been able to do any of those for the first 9 months of this year. So we have got quite a backlog.
Thank you, Jill. I have a question now from Councillor Nora Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether this question can be answered at the moment. Perhaps Jill can. You mentioned, Jill, that there's a significant amount of debt at the moment. Could you tell me in which house banding, does the majority of that fall, please?
I certainly can't tell you off the top of my head, Councillor Clark, at the moment, and I doubt Deb's here at council, but I doubt if she has that information at her fingertips either. We'll have to come. I'm not even sure if we've got that analysed over the bandings, but I'll have to come back to you after council, Councillor Clark, I'm afraid.
That's okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jill.
Jill, Councillor Thomas wishes just to come back in briefly. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Jill, thanks for that. I'm just wondering if I could just delve a little bit deeper into your response, really. And how do you actually ascertain whether someone has the ability to pay or not? Because obviously, if someone's in debt for their council tax, they're obviously going to say they cannot pay. What means do you have as a council to analyse their ability to pay or not?
Okay. I'm not going to ask Deb whether she wants to come in on this. I mean, if I start, we do have quite extensive conversations with people and ask them to produce all sorts of information to make that assessment. So they can produce all sorts of documentation to demonstrate that they haven't got that ability to pay. They then can be directed towards obviously getting some form of benefit, and then we go through all the different options, as I've said, about whether an attachment of earnings or whatever other method over a longer period of time works. So, Deb, did you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Jill. No, I mean, I think we got, like Jill said, we gather a lot of information from the council taxpayer. We asked them to provide a breakdown of their income and their earnings and provide evidence of that. As we've said, in terms of if we go to courts, then we can, put an attachment of earnings or an attachment to benefits. So just because somebody's on benefits doesn't necessarily mean that they don't pay anything. So we try to work with them to obviously come up with the best solution for them to actually make some payment rather than nothing at all. And sometimes it can spread out over quite a period of time, but slowly we're reducing that debt. Sorry, I should have said for the recording, it's Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance.
Yes, thank you, Deborah. We lost you a little bit there, but I think we got the gist of the reply. Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Yes, thanks. Yes, thanks.
Okay, good. Okay, we've had that moved and seconded. Is everybody in favour, please?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Everybody in favour.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 10. To receive the following questions to the Executive from Councillor Altaf Hussain. Councillor Hussain, your question has been put. Are you happy with the answer? And before I go any further, I will ask if you have a supplementary.
Yes, I will just say many thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, can I just stop you there, please, Altaf? Before you go any further, when you have finished your supplementary and had your answer to that supplementary, I will then ask members if anyone else have a supplementary, so that it's fastest fingers first after the answer to the first supplementary, not before, please, members. Thank you, Altaf.
Many thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful for response to my question from Mr. Lindsay Harvey, which I had difficulty in understanding. There are many questions about GDPR, and I don't think we have any policy or guidelines in place. So my humble suggestion is that we should discuss this very important issue either in member developmental activity or in one of the scrutiny committees. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does the member for education, the cabinet member for education, wish to come back in? No. Okay. Does anybody have a supplementary then, please? Right, Councillor Jane Gebby, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have a question for Councillor Hussain, because I know as a member we had to do GDPR training. So I don't understand his question in relation to the GDPR. I'm really sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hussain, do you wish to respond to that?
Mr. Mayor, if I could come in.
Yes, Kelly.
Thank you. For the recording, I'm Kelly Watson, Monitoring Officer. As Councillor Kirby just pointed out, there has been GDPR training for all elected members. We've also offered that training to town and community councils. We have got a GDPR policy. It's been through the relevant approval processes, and we've also got a GDPR officer that we need to have, and she reports into myself then. So GDPR is taken very seriously. We have the inspections, and the Information Commissioner is more than satisfied with what we're doing.
Thank you, Kelly, very much. Councillor Hussain, are you...
I can comment, sir. I had a GDPR meeting before. I attended all the courses, and recently I attended also the Governor's GDPR meeting, and it is there that it transpired that we should be using not our personal emails for our governor's role for our schools. It may be one is a BCBC councillor, he can use that, but if you are not a councillor in BCBC, you have a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Again,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I can,
Yes.
can come in, if I can just confirm that the governing bodies of schools are data controllers in their own right. So Bridgend Council isn't the data controller for the schools. So the responsibility to ensure there's secure facilities for school governors rests with the school. I know that we do provide the hub and governors can use ours, but the responsibility lies with the governing body.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. Councillor Charles Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry I couldn't answer before when you called me in, but my computer had lost my little microphone thing, so I couldn't turn it on. But yes, Kelly in her 2 responses now has basically said what I wanted to say. The governing bodies are data controllers in their own right. Governing bodies are autonomous bodies in their own rights. Lindsay will come in after me, but I guess he's going to say that we strongly recommend that governors use secure email addresses. I'm a governor of Kevin Glass, and I've got a hub email address for Kevin Glass, so I've got the option of using that if I don't want to use my council email address. I'm also a governor of Bridgend College, and I have a Bridgend College email account and address there. So I think it's up to individual councillors who are also governors to make sure that GDPR is being abided by in their settings, and if not, to put things right there. BCBC can strongly advise, but we can't micromanage what school governing bodies do, because they have a lot of devolved responsibility and they have to take that responsibility. But I'll hand over to Lindsay with your permission, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
thank
please.
you.
Yes, thank you, Charles. Lindsay, are you there?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support. Thanks, Councillor Hussain, first of all, for the question. And I apologise if the response that we've provided is not to your satisfaction. I'd be more than happy to pick this up with you after the meeting and give you any additional information that you'd need. As Kelly has said, is that the governing bodies are their own data controllers. But what we have done is we've provided significant support to schools, both from my directorate and from Kelly's team, to help them manage some of the GDPR issues. And also we've brokered additional support for all schools through governing bodies to support this. Now, in the response, the Central South Consortium will readily provide advice to governing bodies. The hub emails are there available free of charge, but because we can't set them up for schools themselves, it would have to be done by the hub digital champion within the schools. But again, if there's any issue in your school or any other school, me or my team would be more than happy to advise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Hussain, are you happy with those responses now?
Yeah, thank you. Point. Just a small point I want to make is that there is a role for GDPR
Mr. Mayor,
officer.
a point of order.
Yes, what is your point of order?
My point of order is the fact that our constitution says that councillors can only ask a supplementary question, and this is the second time that Councillor Hussain has been brought back in after his supplementary question.
Yes,
I just want to make
right.
sure we're following the constitution, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, you're quite right, Councillor. Thank you for that. So thank you very much, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, sir.
And I believe that concludes the business of the day. Item 11, I have no urgent items. So thank you, everybody.